Okay, so this is the first episode of my web series of interviewing interesting people. I am Fred. I'm a peer rep at Off the Record, and today joining me is Becky. If you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Becky Risley. I'm a senior drug and alcohol practitioner for the University of West of England, but also a volunteer for the Loop, as well as sort of Transform.
Perfect. Okay, right. So I've got a couple of questions here for you. So the first question is, what does your role entail, and what would a hypothetical scenario play out like in your sort of day-to-day practice?
Sure. So, my job is a senior drug and alcohol practitioner. So it's not necessarily around sort of getting abstinence from students or, encouraging students to not use drugs. It's a very educational role. So the idea is that students have a safe, confidential space to come and discuss their drug use. It doesn't have to be with any intention around it. It can just be, I'm planning on using MDMA this summer. I'd like to learn a bit more about that. And I'm able to do that in a non-judgmental, safe space where that isn't shared with the university or, myths that are sort of thrown around in friendship groups or anything like that. So it's a sort of factual environment. So that's sort of one capacity of my role. But there are lots of students that come to me who want to make changes to their drug use or alcohol use. So in that case, it would be about trying to get a picture about sort of what's escalated their drug use to the point where they feel they need to take some control. Whether that's been sort of certain traumas or incidences that have happened, or sometimes it's just about it just getting out of hand. It started off fun, and so we did more and more of it, and now it's not being so fun anymore. And it's just about reining it back in. So with those people, I will generally offer a sort of series of 6 sessions, and generally we look at a lot of goal setting about working towards making small changes to start off with. So if somebody is smoking weed every day, telling them to stop for a week isn't a great place to start. No, so it'd be about sort of going, have you tried sort of pushing it back till after you've had your evening meal, and just sort of trying to bring sort of gradual breaks and a bit of control into sort of their use, if that feels like something they'd like to work towards. So quite often I get cannabis is a huge number of my referrals. I think that and alcohol are the sort of top 2. And then which always surprises people. I think people forget about alcohol being a very popular drug.
Well, I wanted to sort of delve into that about alcohol a bit more as well later on. But that's Certainly. What I was going to ask. What were the specific drugs that people come sort of help managing with?
So we generally see. I think alcohol does carry a lot of those sort of ideas that around peer pressure. People are rarely really peer pressured into using ketamine, but people are constantly peer pressured into drinking excessive levels, and there is a shame around it, and there's mocking, and there's all these sort of negative sort of scenarios that can happen when you sort of try and control your alcohol in a student environment. So that's something that I have to look at with people a lot, and the impact of alcohol on problematic drug use as well. People often say that cannabis is a gateway drug, and I dispute that in a huge way. Alcohol is number 1 gateway drug. Nobody ever smoked a spliff and then decided to have a line of Coke for the first time. But people get really drunk and decide to have a line of Coke for the first time.
Exactly.
So the way it disinhibits you and sort of makes you feel like that's I'm up for anything. Whether it's risky or not. So sorry, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent.
No. It's all excellent. I mean, I completely can attest to the fact as a student, if you decide, oh guys, I'm not gonna drink tonight, they'll be like, oh come on, you're being so boring, or stop being such a loser, or like, come on, it'll be fun. But it's like no one would ever be like in a sort of normal environment. They wouldn't be like, oh come on, let's just do some heroin. Or stop being boring, let's do some more heroin.
Completely.
It would never sort of translate in that way at all, would it?
No, definitely not. So I think there's been quite a lot of trying to classify really what alcohol is, and sort of educating people that it's just as much of a drug as cocaine, MDMA, anything else, and we sort of treat it, we treat it very separately and sort of in its own little protected legal pocket. But alcohol is one of the only drugs that if you suddenly stop taking it and you're alcohol dependent, you can die. The only other thing like that is sort of G or benzos. So actually it's not demonized enough.
I know. In a way. The severity of it is just blanketed over by the fact that it is legal, isn't it? Like,
yes, completely.
I heard you talk before on our Acts of Activism series. Check out if you haven't already. That the study by Professor David Nutt about the sort of severity and harms of drugs and alcohol coming out on top, which is really, really interesting.
So they say, if it was being sort of classified today, it would be a Class A substance. So it's and I just think that makes that we need to question all the information that we're being given by the government and around the war on drugs, and their risks associated with their classification. It generally doesn't really reflect how harmful something is with their class. So
just because something's legal doesn't mean it's not dangerous. Right. So on to the next question. This is sort of a two-parter actually. So what's a common misconception people have about individuals with substance misuse or addiction?
I think that a big one is that they've got they've chosen this life, they've got themselves into this mess, and why should we as a state be funding you to get out of this mess? And I think it's such a big topic, but we need to sort of split recreational drug use and problematic drug use into two very different categories. So problematic drug use would be addiction. That would be, the drug use that people are partaking in is causing such harm that it's affecting various aspects of their life. And with that problematic drug use, the research suggests that, this is coming from trauma. So there's a thing called ACEs, which has come out in the recent years, and that's called adverse childhood experiences. So that's sort of ticking whether you're, it could be as something like your parents getting divorced and having a really messy breakup and sort of being caught in the middle of that as a child, or, other sort of traumas that, young people might go through. So these things can sort of be like, they're like almost markers as to sort of how your brain's going to develop and how you're going to sort of survive and get on in later life. And it goes to show that, poverty, growing up in poverty, in abusive environments where you're struggling to sort of feel safe, all of these things are a key factor in addiction later on in life. I think I have got a stat round here somewhere. Between 7 to 10 times more likely to have addiction issues later on in life if you've had trauma as a young person. So, stigmatizing and sort of, giving these people with addiction issues this idea that this is your choice and you've got yourself into this mess is criminalizing the most vulnerable people in our society, the people that started off with a really rough deal. They were born into poverty, into sort of abuse, whatever it is. And that's trailed with them throughout their lives to this point where now they're rejected by the state and rejected by communities because they're using drugs problematically. So, I think it's, we don't sort of scratch beneath the surface very far to see sort of what's going on really. And it's, it's really sad that, people are stigmatized and criminalized in such a way. And, actually it's a coping mechanism. And, for some people I work with, I've had to say to them that, at one point you chose to take drugs instead of killing yourself. In my opinion, that was the right decision. If that's harm reduction right there, if you manage to keep yourself alive so we can do this session today, and part of that was you using drugs, that was what else are you going to do? That's literally is very similar to a quote from Mick Jagger's ex-wife. And she said something, this isn't verbatim, but she said something along the lines of, if I didn't have heroin, I would have killed myself, or something like that, or I would be dead if I didn't have heroin. So it's that sort of, it's crazy. I also heard another statistic about people who become addicted, and it's 90% of people don't become addicted to drugs when they recreationally use them, but it's 10% of people who do. And that within that 10%,
2/3 of them have been abused as a child. So that's emotional, sexual, physical abuse. So it shows that pretty much most addicts have been abused at some point in their life, and it's important to know that no 3-year-old has never wanted and ever said that they want to be abused. So
no, exactly. So I think that's it's really important to sort of try and distinguish the two, because recreational use is very different. Whereas recreational use it's about enjoying yourself. Hopefully that's that's why I sort of try and explain to students is that that's okay. It is about having a good time and enjoying yourself and pushing those limits and pushing your boundaries. But when it falls into the addiction category and into that problematic use, it's about managing life. It's not about getting high and feeling these fun things. It's about not feeling intense despair. So I think it really needs to sort of be separated into sort of, at the end of the day, can't be looked at through the same lens. And I think and I think there's lots of misconceptions about young people choosing to use drugs, about them not being strong and just saying no, or making bad choices. And the way the brain is forming in those sort of years between sort of 14 and 21, it's designed to push as many boundaries as you can. Or otherwise people would, if people didn't have their brain in that sort of transformative stage, they'd just stay at home and go, great, mum cooks for me, she cleans for me, this is great, I've got no reason to leave the nest. But something in us goes, I want to try something new. I want to see what's out there. I want to do something different. And part and parcel of that can be drug taking. So
it's all about we're sort of intrinsic risk takers, aren't we?
Exactly. It's dangerous, like driving really fast or having sex with whoever it is. It's like we put ourselves in these risky positions. And there's so much learning that happens at that sort of point as well.
Because also you've got to think that our brains haven't fully formed until we're 25. Our whole prefrontal cortex, which deals with a lot of our executive functions, that hasn't developed. So we still take risks to degrees that may harm our life in some negative way, which is why car insurance becomes lower when you get 25 and plus.
Completely.
Less people are in car accidents or car incidents.
Because we're more cautious, because we've learned. We've learned from mistakes, and as frustrating as it might be for a parent or a carer, like you can tell them all of the mistakes you made, but it doesn't resonate. We need to learn these things from ourselves.
Exactly, it needs to be first hand.
And unfortunately, sometimes that is getting alcohol poisoning and going, I'm not going to drink a bottle of spirits to myself again.
Exactly. Well, I've definitely learned that before.
Haven't we all?
Part and parcel of it, isn't it? But okay, right. So that's sort of going sort of off your first response to the first question about education around drugs. What has been some of the ways in which the war on drugs or drug prohibition has impeded our understanding of drugs and education around them?
Sure. So I think back in the 80s, 90s, there was a real big sort of push on sort of, stopping, really scaring young people about heroin, but also about MDMA as well. And so the big message was that too much water being consumed when you're on MDMA can flood your system, basically. You drown in yourself in a way. It messes with all the electrolytes and messes up your sort of functioning. So from drinking too much water. So that was the big message of like, don't drink too much water. And so from that, people didn't drink enough water, So, we get sort of, and that was on the back of, somebody dying from drinking too much water at a rave, trying to be really conscious about, doing ecstasy sensibly. Let's drink plenty of water, and it got out of control. So without proper harm reduction messages that talk about actually the function of dosages and ingesting these substances and how to manage being high on them, without that, people have had to learn the hard way. Like we were saying a moment ago, it's about, people have had to guess what a sensible dose of MDMA might be, or a relatively safer dose of MDMA might be, and that will only be sort of explored or found out through trial and error, which which in itself is criminal. You know, these substances are available, whether we like it or not, they are available. So the best thing we can try and do is implement some sort of guide to reduce the risks. And so I think, you know, a blanket ban or a sort of, you know, this war on drugs that's come out has made it go, you either take them or you don't. And if you take them, that's on your head be it. There's no advice, there's no support, there's no sort of education. It's you shouldn't be doing it, you know. And another thing that sort of that impact has had is when people are told, you know, so if you take MDMA or if you take a pill, it will kill you. You run the risk of dying, and then you take it and you don't die, then any bit of drug education you had before that, you chuck away as invalid. You go, well, they were lying,
definitely.
You know, and it creates a false environment of this education that's being shared. If it's not factual, if it's not accurate, and if it doesn't listen to what young people are saying or older people are saying, you know, it becomes dismissed. So you know, and that's even more dangerous.
It's funny, isn't it? Like, there's such a disconnect from about what is actually true about drugs into what we think we know about drugs. Like I was recently doing a bit of research and came across a man called Dr. Carl Hart, who's a professor at Columbia University, and he's looked into crack cocaine and how powerful, strong, addictive it is, because there's the message that you do it once and you'll become addicted to it. And actually what he found is that he got people who were clinically diagnosed as being addicted to crack cocaine. And then in the experiment, he would offer them £5 or a shot of crack cocaine, which was worth more than £5. And half of the time, people would choose the money. So it's just looking at it the way that when there's a better alternative, people will go and find it. It's like people don't want to become addicted to these drugs.
Completely.
People,
So have you heard of the sort of experiment of like Rat Park?
Yeah.
So that's very much
Alexandra.
So that's very much based on that. And for anybody who is interested, there is what's it called? There is a brilliant website. I'll give Fred the link to be able to go along with this.
Please do.
You can pick up little mice and put them in the chair, and then it goes into their brain and sort of when they're on.
I've done that. I did that.
So it's a really great, interesting tool just to be like, oh, okay, this is how sort of drugs work on the brain. You know, so I think back to your question and like how the war on drugs have sort of affected our understanding and our sort of education around them as well. You know, there was a lot of research going into how MDMA or psilocybin could support mental health diagnoses or relationship counselling or you know, having a therapeutic property. So that in the 50s, that was really strongly being researched, and then you know, everything got sort of locked it down, and it became illegal for them to do so, or very, very, very expensive to try and do these trials. And that has changed in recent years. And what we're seeing, you know, we've a gentleman called Dr. Ben Sessa has been doing research with people who are alcohol dependent and have literally having detoxes, and this sort of revolving door sort of classification of sort of in and out of treatment. And, you know, the success rate, having used MDMA on 2 occasions, surrounded by a lot of psychotherapy, it's been, you know, the results have been outstanding. And, you know, we use ketamine in pharmacology every day in hospitals. You know, it's used readily. We use opiates. You know, we use drugs that are seen as recreation or can be used recreationally in medicine. And, you know, I think this, the war on drugs, the sort of stamp down on these drugs has really impacted the possibility of medicines. And like, really, you know, the world is in desperate need of some revolutionary mental health medicines, you know, with something a bit different and something that can be, you know, a couple of doses here and there and lots of therapy, you know, rather than long-term prescriptions for people. So, you know, I think, there's been a lot of wasted time.
It has, It's really amazing work what Dr. Ben Sessa and Professor David Nutt are doing at the moment, and Dr. Robin Carhart-Harris at Imperial College London. But I've been recently looking at Dr. Ben Sessa, and I watched a TED Talk of his the other day, and he was saying that it's 85% of the people who do MDMA-assisted psychotherapy like actually cured, like not just like not just don't show symptoms anymore. They literally do not have the classification anymore of being, and that was people with post-traumatic stress disorder as well. Yeah.
So I think it's really important to say as a caveat here, this isn't MDMA that they bought from a dealer on the streets of Bristol. This is chemically, it's from a laboratory. I remember Ben saying it costs something about £20,000 to get these doses.
He said it's very, very expensive.
This is and it's legal. It's regulated in such a way that makes it possible. But and I think that's a key thing as well. It's these aren't. We're not talking about recreational drugs being used in that respect. Just like people in hospital being injected with ketamine because they've been in a road traffic accident aren't having ketamine from the streets.
No, it's different means of transmission as well, isn't it? They're not completely. They're not sniffing ketamine there.
No,
give it intravenous. I was reading a book last summer called Chasing the Scream. I'm sure you've read it. And he talks about how we are given heroin all the time in hospital. People who have hip replacements, who have any sort of severe bone breaks or anything, we're given heroin, but it's just called morphine, which is medically pure heroin. And virtually no people who administered that and then come out of hospital then become addicts. So it's sort of the disinformation that doing a drug once will make you become addicted to it, when actually it's the addiction is not in the drug itself, it's in the lives of
complicated external issues that are going on completely. And what they say is that people do have withdrawals from using those opiates in hospital. They do have withdrawals, but it's manageable because they've got a comfortable house to be in, and they've got food, and they've got loving and supporting families around them, and all of their sort of care needs are met.
That's so the main point.
The withdrawal symptoms are like, I feel a bit ill, whereas actually, or just a little bit sick or under weather. But
okay, right. So I could just go on forever and ever. It's dangerous. Okay, so to our fourth question. So what are the ways young people can reduce their harm around drug and alcohol use? What are some of the sort of practical, pragmatic steps that people can take ownership over?
So I don't know if you've heard of a website called Drugs and Me.
No, I haven't actually.
No? Brilliant. Check it out. So what I really like about that website is it gives you, you can see what happens when I take MDMA and cocaine together. What happens when I take MDMA while I'm taking SSRIs, which are antidepressants?
Right.
What happens if I take alcohol and ketamine together? And it gives you this opportunity to put these two drugs together and look at the risks around them. And, polydrug use is what we call it in my field, when you take more than one substance at a time. So that rapidly increases the risk around substance use. If your ketamine on its own has its risks, yes, but adding alcohol into the mix, really cranks that up. The risk of passing out and choking on your vomit, or just becoming unconscious, really increases when alcohol is on board. Cocaine and alcohol together, the risks rapidly increase there. It metabolizes into a third product, which is called cocoethylene within the body. And so that becomes a lot more toxic to the heart, to the liver, to the kidneys than those two drugs would separately. So, having that knowledge and understanding around actually what drugs not to take together, it can be really, really helpful and a really good starting point. So, I would really encourage people to just think about just taking one at a time to start off with. There's so much of a culture of let's see how much things I can get on board whilst drinking so much alcohol at the same time, like alongside it, without sort of taking into account how alcohol is going to affect it. Avoiding alcohol when taking recreational drugs would be my number one bit of advice, really. And number two is, where possible, test your substances. So I volunteer for an organisation called The Loop. I don't know if you've heard of them. Yeah. I've seen them at festivals I've been to before. So I've been into events before just to have a little look around, see what's going on. Yeah, really interesting work. So their idea is that they're like the last line of defense. So they're not saying, festivals get rid of your security or don't search people on their way in. They go, and despite all these measures that you put in place to keep people safe at festivals, drugs still get in a massive way.
Yeah.
They get in. So the last thing we can do is give somebody a safe space to go, is what's in that bag what you think it is? And also in that environment, people often find things on the floor as well, and because of the alcohol on board or because of the reduced inhibitions, go, well, what's the harm in giving it a go? And that's where people can really run into trouble. So if you don't know what you're taking to start off with, you're already on the back foot. You're already taking a massive gamble. So people can send substances off to an organization called Wedinos. So they you just find them on website. I can give you a link for them as well afterwards.
Okay, that'd be brilliant. Yeah.
So you could, in a free post off a little sample. They'd only need like a little bit of powder or a little bit of the pill to say, is this ketamine or isn't it? Is this MDMA or isn't it? Or is there something really dangerous, a scary adulterant in there that we can identify?
Wow, that's so. I love that. I didn't realise that was a possibility. Yeah, that's really good.
So it's a Welsh government-funded organisation, but they accept donations.
Yeah.
They accept the English. Yeah. They accept samples from across the UK.
Okay.
And so that's one option, although it's not immediate, and quite often drug taking can be spare of the moment and those sort of things. So you would need a bit of planning for that. So the other alternative is getting sort of reagent testing kits. So these are a set of chemicals which can be bought online, and you put whatever substance you have on a white plate, and you put a drop of this chemical on it, and it will change color depending on what's in it. So it doesn't give you a great insight into how strong it is, or if there are, if it's pure or if it isn't pure, but it will be able to tell you if there's something really dangerous in it or not.
Yeah.
So, and that's, if you can start off with like choosing one substance and knowing really what's in it, then it's just about dosage. Then it's just about starting low and taking it slow, allowing your body to feel the effects of the substance before redosing. Remembering that sort of swallowing something, ingesting it into your stomach is probably the slowest way to ingest a substance. So you need to allow a lot of time, whether it's a bomb of MDMA, a pill, an edible, plenty of time to let that kick in before you redose.
Yeah.
But snorting something is going to be a lot quicker.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard of people using those kits before, like before festivals. So sort of buying in advance and then using them to test what they've got, and it gives them a bit of an idea as to what they're taking.
So if any of your listeners on Radio Fred are interested, actually, and our students at the University of Bristol Drugs Project and the University of Bristol are doing a pilot at the moment where they're offering harm reduction sessions where you get one of those kits.
Oh wow, okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
So worth chasing that up.
Yeah, definitely. Perfect. Okay, right. So I think we're on to our final question now.
Sure.
So, this is just a short one. This isn't as in depth as the other ones, but this is just exactly. Do you have any book, film, documentary recommendations about this topic, and who is someone that inspired you in this topic area?
Sure. So I guess for me, there is lots of films about drug taking, and that is can be enjoyable to watch, but I mean for me it's the war on drugs is a real gripes of mine. And that's what I've sort of spent a lot of time spending my time reading about or sort of researching. So a book called Narconomics, have you heard of that?
No, but this question is pretty much for myself, and I
thought it was, Fred.
secondary for the people watching, but no, sure. I'm going to make a list out of all.
Brilliant. So Narconomics is by Tom Wainwright, and it looks at the sort of, we in the UK have been impacted massively by what's gone on in America. So we've basically just copied whatever they've done. We've gone, oh, okay, yeah, we'll get on board with that as well.
Yeah.
And it really explores sort of how the war on drugs came about, what the benefit was to the government at the time.
Yeah.
And the racial sort of disparity behind it as well. So actually, it was very much the cannabis trade was strongly related to the Mexican culture and people of Mexico, and that was the sort of big gripes of the American presidents at the time.
Yep.
Making Mexico money, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And then crack cocaine was strongly associated with sort of the African American culture, whereas and the sort of the ways that society sort of responded to that was, if you were a middle-class white guy snorting cocaine, you'll get a slap on the wrist and a fine. If you're a black guy from the streets of New York, you'll get a prison sentence for the same equivalent of having crack. Whereas actually the chemical makeup is just the same.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's the same product. So it explores quite deeply into sort of the financial benefit of the war on drugs for the government at the time. Which can be quite infuriating to read. But it's a really interesting read, and then it sort of flips over into sort of actually how we could make this work for the people of the world. And there's many countries where cannabis grows really readily available, really organically, I guess, without having to have it under really intense lights and grown with really strong chemicals. But sort of where it's placed in the world, it doesn't sort of support the Western economy, and it doesn't sort of feed into that. So that's a really interesting one. David Nutt's book, Drugs Without All the Hot Air. Have you read that?
No, I didn't realize it had is it quite a big book?
I've only read it on the UE library, so virtually. So it's on there.
Okay, I can get it for free.
So that's another really interesting one. It just takes who is my hero? David Nutt is my hero. I think he's amazing. So I
thought you were going to say that.
So he's taken all of the moral, sort of emotional views around substance use and put them in a box, and he's gone, give me the facts. What are we really dealing with here? And I think, he's not some sort of 70s hippie background, or he doesn't seem like he's got this. He's got into this line of work through research and then through frustration, and going, hang on a minute, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't add up. How we're treating this social issue is totally counterproductive to what could be going on. And just what I think is, we wouldn't accept any other social issue and let it continue with such monumental failure, like we're seeing at the moment with the war on drugs, and allow policy to stay as it is. To keep going, this isn't working, but we're going to keep doing what we're doing, And I think that's a real big part of what David Nutt is trying to get across, is going, the laws don't reflect the risks. And isn't the purpose of the government to protect us? Isn't it to look after us? Isn't that what they're, that's why we employ them, is to take care of us. And actually, when it comes to the war on drugs, something is not quite right.
Something's not going right. So just to go off what you said about David Nutt, I was watching a talk he did the other day as well, and he wrote a paper like way back when. I think I don't know if it was in the 80s or 70s, probably the 80s maybe, but he wrote a satirical paper called Equity versus Ecstasy.
Okay.
And he was making that horse riding is essentially more dangerous than taking ecstasy.
Completely.
How many people die or seriously damaged by it.
Completely. And what we're seeing at the moment with MDMA is killing more young people each year. That is the one that is on the increase.
Wow, I didn't know that.
But so every year we're seeing more and more people die from MDMA. But what we're also seeing is, when I was working for the Loop, pills being tested were 3 to 4 times as strong as they were back in the 90s. So an 80 milligram dose of MDMA is approximately what somebody maybe my size would need to be able to feel the effects that you're looking for.
Right.
Whereas some of these pills would have 340, 360 milligrams of MDMA. So,
Wow.
and this is all about the black market, and this is all about the sellers going, well, I can get all this MDMA, I can charge £10 for one pill that only is that size, instead of £10 for all of these, which take up all of this space. And, you know, we saw it, we didn't see it, but they saw it in prohibition around alcohol in the 1920s, was everybody stopped drinking beer and lager and switched to spirits because it was stronger and easier to transport and easier to hide.
Yeah.
But, you know, and it's more potent, so you can get more for your money. You know, so the drugs are getting stronger, and it's financial reasons. And, you know, only the dealers and the black market is benefiting, and it just becomes more dangerous for the users.
That's referred to as the Iron Law of Prohibition, isn't it?
Is it? I don't know.
Yeah, it's the way that when you make something illegal, you take. So yeah, for example, beer. It's hard to sell loads of beer, but you can sell loads of vodka in a small space, and it's super powerful. It's the same with like the example that I read in a book. It happens everywhere, but like, for example, when you go to prom, you don't often get people smuggling in crates of beer, but you will get them smuggling a flask of vodka because it packs the biggest punch.
Yes.
And so that's why like crack cocaine was also made a thing, because it packs a punch in a smaller dosage than cocaine. Yeah. But yeah. Okay, right. So one more book.
Sure. Oh, one more book.
Yeah.
So then there is the How to Legalize Drugs. So just to put it out there. So Steve Rolls, have you heard of Transform?
Oh my God, yeah. I've been looking at their website quite a lot, actually. Yeah.
So
do you know what? I read like the first 5 pages of their report.
Brilliant. So yeah, they've got a really handy little guide, basically, of like, and you know, I think it was almost sold as like how to like get your friends on board, or like how to have this argument with other people, really, because you know it is an argument that I have to have with people. It's going, no, I am right about this. Things should be different. You know, things can be legalized and regulated, and and Steve Rolls just puts it in such a brilliant way, articulates it in such a wonderful way of going, this makes sense. And, you know, Transform's biggest sort of agenda is to make drugs boring. Let's make drugs boring, you know, and I think that's brilliant. You know, at the moment, it's so glamorized. It's so, you know, untouchable and dangerous and all of this stuff that makes people go, I'm interested. What's that? What's going on over there? You know, so his big thing is going, let's make this really boring. Let's take all this sort of glamour of the dark web, dark black market, all of that stuff out of it, and just regulate it so it's, you know, yes, you can choose to use this, but it's not such a big deal.
No, it's just, you know, it's I was fascinated when I first started reading about them and how they helped to create the regulated system that now is in place in Uruguay for cannabis. Now they've got a regulated system, and it's now $2, but you know exactly what it is, what exactly is in it, what percentage of THC, et cetera, is in it. And I was so fascinated to hear that they're literally just down at King Street. So I was like, whoa, that's crazy.
So you know, you can sign up to be a volunteer, you know, and part of that sometimes is just writing letters to MPs going, hey, let's keep this on our agenda, let's not forget about this, because you know, poor Steve has been banging this drum for 20 odd years. You know, he's like, I really didn't think I'd be doing this for this long. This makes so much sense. What's taking us so long?
It's funny because I told my friend that I was speaking to yourself and explained what your role was, and I was like, I can bet you that she will have the same view as me around the war on drugs and around regulated systems and stuff. And they were like, are you sure? Like, how do you know? And I was like, trust me. Once you've done enough research in this area, not to say that I have tons more, as we all do, but like once you have researched it to such a degree, you find so much overwhelming evidence to just completely change your mind. And it was such a profound point in the summer after I read Chasing the Scream. I was like, oh my God, it just makes sense. I've been saying this for ages, but not with really the the sort of empirical knowledge to back it up. Like I've said, like in sort of jest, being like, heroin should be legalized. Like when I was 18, but I didn't really know why. I just knew that Switzerland had done something about it. But yeah, it's I would implore anyone and everyone to go and just research about the war on drugs.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, I think you're totally right. It is about once you allow your brain to go, hey, that could be a possibility, I'm open to it, rather than going, I've been brought up going, this is wrong and it's a no. Once you sort of allow yourself to go there and be embracing of that information that is out there, it's a no-brainer, really.
It is.
You know?
It is indeed.
Yeah. And, you know, it's just in thinking of the money that could be gathered from taxes, from police budgets, from everything, you know, all of those sort of things. At the moment, we're spending billions on criminalizing young people smoking a spliff, you know, and it's going, actually, this is wasting police time. It's wasting our money. All of that could go into that preventative work. You know, into that preventative work to prevent those ACEs that we talked about earlier, those adverse child experiences, to fund education. I don't know about you, but I think I had a drugs and sex education rolled into one session. You know, my drugs education was super poor, you know, and it's like one session, you know, at a time where I just wasn't interested and it was really not engaging. It's like, this needs to be... This, you know, substances are a coping mechanism for lots of change, you know, when people can go in and out of that. But, you know, young people don't get taught how to cope, you know. No. So there's like, you know, that funding could go into drug education, but also well-being education of going, hey, this is how you're resilient. This is what you do. This is how we cope, you know. So, you know, I know how to spend the money as well.
Yeah.
I know how to get it. I know how to spend it.
Yeah, that's it. I completely agree with everything that you've just said there. I think that education seems like the main machine and engine that we need to use to solve this problem a lot of the times. Because once it's sort of solved in the consciousness of everyone, that we can sort of make the change to make the policy makers up top to get their stuff in gear. Well, I think that wraps it up really nicely.
Brilliant.
So yeah, big thanks to you, Becky. It's been really informative. I've learned so much, and it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, no, really lovely to speak to you as well, and I'll send you over those links.
Oh yeah, perfect. Thank you for the book recommendation as well.
No problem.